The fluorescent lights in the ceiling buzzed like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow over Eddie's diner. Vivian Cole wiped down table number 7 for the 3rd time that night, her back aching so badly it felt like it might snap in half. The smell of burnt coffee and grease had sunk into every thread of her uniform, the kind of stink that would never wash out. 3 double shifts this week. 3. And still, it was not enough to cover the rent and the daycare money for Sophie. She caught her reflection in the window glass. The dark circles under her eyes, skin pale as milk, 27 years old. Yet she looked 40. When had she become invisible like this? When had she stopped being a person and turned into another piece of furniture in this grease-soaked nightmare? 11:47 at night. Sophie was probably sleeping soundly at Grandma's, her small face peaceful, not knowing her mother was falling apart piece by piece just to keep the two of them from going under. Vivian needed something. Anything. One moment to feel she was still alive, still wanted by someone, still something more than a walking ghost. Her fingers moved faster than her brain could think. I've been thinking about you all night. I can't stop imagining your hands on me. What would you taste like? I want you so much it hurts. Come over. I'll make sure you don't regret it. Her heart hammered as she hit send. When was the last time she had truly wanted anything? When was the last time someone touched her like she mattered? The phone vibrated. Once, twice, 3 times in a row. Vivian pulled it out, expecting an excited text from Rachel, or an eager reply from Nathan. Her blood turned to ice. The message had not gone to Nathan. It went to a number she had saved only yesterday. A number from the business card of the guest who had left a $100 tip with a note. Call if you need anything. Lucian Moretti. And beneath it, 3 messages that made her stomach drop straight through the floor. Interesting. Very interesting. Don't go anywhere. Lucian Moretti, the man who had walked into the diner yesterday with 2 men in black suits flanking him like shadows. The one whose presence drained the oxygen from the room. The one whose eyes had followed her with an intensity that raised gooseflesh on her skin. Black, endless, and utterly unreadable. A Mafia boss. Rumor said he owned half the Boston underworld, and she had just sent him a sexually explicit message. The coffee pot slipped from Vivian's hands, shattering on the floor like a gunshot. But she heard nothing, only the scream of blood in her ears. A new message lit up the screen. Address, then another line. I can find it myself. But I want you to give it to me. Vivian's hands shook so badly she could barely type, but she sent the address anyway. What choice did she have? He said he could find it himself, and she believed him. Men like Lucian Moretti had ways of uncovering things that were supposed to stay hidden. 15 minutes later, Vivian stood inside her shabby apartment, her heart pounding as if it might break through her ribs. 3 knocks at the door. Precise, almost polite. Vivian. His voice came through the thin wood, smooth like aged whiskey, and twice as dangerous. Open the door. Not a request. With men like him, it was never a request. Vivian opened it, and Lucian Moretti stood there, filling the doorway, making the hallway suddenly feel too small to hold him. Taller than she remembered, a little over 1.85 meters, black hair swept back from his face like something carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, and those eyes, black as sin and twice as seductive, pinned her in place with an intensity that made her knees want to buckle. He stepped into the apartment, his gaze sweeping once around. Worn-out furniture, a cracked ceiling, a stack of unpaid bills on the table. Vivian saw herself through his eyes. A girl living in poverty, desperate, completely unworthy of his attention. But she was not outside his attention, was she? She had made sure of that, with her catastrophic mistake. That message was pretty interesting. He turned to face her. It was an accident, Vivian whispered, backing up until her spine hit the door. I didn't mean to send it to you. I'm sorry. I have a daughter. She's only 3 years old. Please. He moved closer, close enough that she felt the heat of his body. His breath brushed her face. Do you think I came here to hurt you? Men like you don't show up at a woman's home in the middle of the night to talk about the weather. He laughed, a dark, dangerous laugh. You know, Vivian. He lifted his hand, and she went rigid, but he only wiped the tears from her cheek with his thumb. So gentle it shattered something inside her. I see you. A woman exhausting herself for the little girl she loves more than her own life. A woman who has forgotten what it feels like to be touched with tenderness. A woman who longs for connection so much that she reaches for strangers in a bar, hoping they'll make her feel alive. Vivian's tears spilled out of control. I see you, Vivian. All of you. His thumb brushed along her cheek, and she trembled. That message you sent, he murmured, wasn't an accident. Not really. It was your subconscious telling you what you truly want. His hand slid into her hair, tugging lightly until she had to tilt her face up to him. You belong to me now, he said, his voice soft, almost gentle, but with steel underneath. The moment you sent that message, whether you meant to or not, you became mine. And I take care of what belongs to me. Then he let her go, stepping back, calm as if nothing had happened. Go to sleep, Vivian. You have work tomorrow. He walked to the door, paused on the threshold, and looked back at her with those bottomless dark eyes. Oh, one more thing. Delete Nathan's number. You won't need it anymore. The door closed. Vivian stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. The phone vibrated. A message from the unknown number that somehow she knew was his. Good night, Karamia. I'll be thinking about all the things you promised in that message. And soon, you'll do every single one. Vivian could not sleep. How could she, when his words echoed in her mind like a dark lullaby? You belong to me now. Could Vivian escape this whirlpool of fate, or would she surrender to the most dangerous man in the city? The answer will surprise you. If you want to know what happens next, please press like to support the channel. Share this video with people who love emotional stories. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part. Vivian lay on the thin mattress, eyes wide open, staring up at the ceiling. Cracks crawled across it in crooked lines, like a map of some ruined land. She had looked at them for hundreds of nights, but never had they been as sharp as they were now. Maybe because she could not close her eyes. Every time she tried, the darkness behind her lids filled with his face. Lucian Moretti. Those bottomless black eyes, a jaw sharp as a blade, and the way he looked at her, as if she were something precious instead of trash. You belong to me now. His words rang through Vivian's head like a bell that would not stop sounding. She turned onto her side and pulled the thin blanket up over her chest, but the cold was not coming from outside. It came from deep in her bones, from the fear gnawing at her cell by cell. But it was not only fear. That was what made Vivian want to scream. She remembered the moment he touched her face, his thumb gliding along her cheek, wiping away a tear she had not even realized she was crying. Soft, gentle in a way that hurt. Brandon had never touched her like that. No one had ever touched her like that, as if she deserved to be held with care. Vivian clenched her teeth, furious with herself. He was a Mafia boss, the most dangerous man in the city, a man who could make her disappear and no one would ever find the body. And yet her body still trembled when she remembered the warmth of his hand. I see you, Vivian. Every part of you. Tears rose again, slipping into the corner of her eye and soaking the pillow. How long had she been invisible? How many years had she drifted through life like a ghost, pouring coffee for people who never looked at her face, working herself to the bone for pennies, carrying everything alone while no one ever asked if she was all right? And then he appeared. He saw her. He truly saw her. Vivian reached for her phone on the floor. The screen flared to life, painfully bright in the dark. 3:47 in the morning. His message still sat there like a curse she could not erase. Good night, Karamia. She scrolled down, searching for Nathan's number. Still there. He told her to delete it, but she had not. It was the only small act of rebellion she had left, proof that she still controlled something, anything, in her own life. But when she looked at Nathan's name, Vivian felt nothing. No racing heart, no tight twist in her stomach, no hunger, just a meaningless name. Sophie. The thought of her daughter yanked Vivian back into reality like a bucket of cold water. The little girl was sleeping peacefully at Grandma's, knowing nothing about the storm crashing into their lives. 3 years old, innocent, completely dependent on a mother who was lying here trembling because of a message sent to the wrong number. What would Vivian do if Lucian wanted to hurt Sophie? What did she have to protect her child? No money, no power, no one on her side. But he had said he took care of what belonged to him. And he had said she belonged to him. Did that mean Sophie would be protected too? Or was it just sweet, dangerous talk, right before he crushed her? The clock struck 4 in the morning. 2 more hours until she had to get up and pick up Sophie. Vivian closed her eyes, trying to force herself to sleep. But in the darkness, Lucian Moretti's black eyes were still watching her, waiting. 6 in the morning. The alarm rang out like an air raid siren inside Vivian's skull. She opened her eyes and felt as if a truck had rolled over her. It had not been sleep, not really. Only scattered sinkings into darkness, broken up by flashes of those haunting black eyes. Vivian sat up. Her head felt heavy, as if it were tied to stone. Her arms and legs were useless with exhaustion. She dragged herself into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and flinched at the face staring back. The dark circles under her eyes were deeper than yesterday. Her skin was so sallow it looked nearly translucent. Her lips were dry and cracked. 27 looking 40, And after last night, maybe even older. Cold water slapped her face, but it did not make her feel any more awake. Vivian got dressed, pulled on her old coat with the shoulders worn thin, and stepped out of the apartment. Boston in the early morning cut like a knife. Wind swept through streets that were still nearly empty. She walked 15 minutes to her mother's house, each step heavy, as if she wore shackles. Patricia Cole's small home sat at the end of an alley. The paint on the walls had faded, but the place was clean, and warmer than Vivian's apartment by miles. Vivian knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Her mother stood there, a hard life etched into her 52-year-old face, but her eyes still full of worry. "You look terrible," Patricia said instead of hello. "Couldn't sleep last night." Vivian forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Where's Sophie?" She barely had time to hear an answer before a small whirlwind burst from the back room. Sophie, 3 years old, messy curls of brown hair, big round eyes lighting up the moment she saw her mother. "Mommy." The little girl crashed into Vivian's legs and held on tight, as if she was afraid her mother might vanish. Vivian bent and lifted her up, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo. In that moment, just that moment, she forgot everything. She forgot Lucian Moretti. She forgot the fateful message. She forgot the fear chewing at her from the inside. Sophie was everything she had. The reason she still breathed, still worked herself to the bone, still fought through every day. "Mommy, are you okay?" Sophie placed her tiny hand on Vivian's cheek and tipped her head, studying her with eyes that seemed older than 3. Vivian's heart tightened. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Why would you ask?" "Your eyes look sad," Sophie said, innocent as dawn. "You're always tired." That simple sentence pierced Vivian's chest like a knife. She swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat, refusing to cry in front of her child. "You're always tired." 3 years old, and Sophie had already noticed, had already grown used to seeing her mother worn out, fading, forcing herself through the days. Was this the childhood Vivian was giving her? A mother who was always tired. "I promise I'll rest more," Vivian whispered, even though she knew it was a lie. She could not afford the luxury of rest. Not with rent coming due, not with the daycare money a week late, not with everything poised to collapse. Patricia looked at her daughter with a quiet ache in her eyes, but she did not speak. She knew Vivian's situation. She knew what her daughter was carrying, and she also knew she could not do much more than keep watch over her granddaughter every night. Vivian held Sophie tighter, feeling her small warmth spread through her chest. This was why she had to be strong, why she had to keep going. No matter who Lucian Moretti was, no matter what he wanted, Sophie was the only priority. On the way back, Sophie held her mother's hand, chattering about last night's dream, about the cat Grandma kept, about the picture her teacher had praised at daycare. Vivian listened, nodded at the right moments, but her mind was elsewhere. The phone in her coat pocket felt as heavy as a brick. She pulled it out and opened her contacts. Nathan's number was still there. Vivian stared at it for a long time. Lucian had told her to delete it, but she had not. It was the only thing she could still choose for herself. A small proof that she did not belong to him completely. Not yet. Vivian dropped Sophie off at daycare, kissed her forehead, then watched the small figure run into the classroom with the other children. She stood there a few seconds longer, trying to memorize her daughter's smile as if it were the only medicine strong enough to help her face today. Eddie's diner rose in front of her like a familiar monster. Dirty glass doors, a flickering sign, the smell of grease spilling all the way out onto the sidewalk. She took a deep breath, then pushed the door and stepped inside. The bell rang, the sound she knew by heart, but today it made her flinch. Marcus stood behind the counter, and the moment he saw her, his eyes widened. The look on his face was half worry, half curiosity, like he wanted to ask something but did not dare open his mouth. Vivian knew why. Last night she had shattered the coffee pot and then run out of the place like she was being chased. She had not explained, had not asked permission, had simply vanished into the dark. Anyone would wonder. "You okay?" Marcus finally asked, his voice rough. "I'm fine," Vivian said, not looking at him. She went straight into the staff room, changed into her uniform, pulled her hair up high. Every movement was automatic, like a robot following a program. The shift began, and Vivian tried to sink into the familiar rhythm. Pour coffee, wipe tables, take orders, carry plates, but everything felt wrapped in a heavy fog. She heard customers speak and did not understand. She looked at food and did not truly see it. She moved without feeling her own feet beneath her. Her mind was stuck on last night, on that shabby apartment, on Lucian Moretti's face framed in her doorway. The doorbell rang and Vivian nearly dropped her tray. She snapped her head around, heart pounding wildly. eyes locked on the entrance. Only an old man, moving slowly, taking a seat in the corner. Vivian let out a breath and forced herself to steady. Not him. But 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. This time a middle-aged couple. Not him. Then it rang again. A loud group of college kids. Still not him. Each time the bell sounded, Vivian's heart jumped into her throat. Each time she held her breath, waiting for that tall figure in a black suit to step through the door. And each time he did not appear, she did not know whether she felt relief or disappointment. Disappointment? No. That could not be right. She was supposed to be afraid of him. That was what Vivian told herself. Last night had only been a nightmare. Some strange dream brought on by exhaustion and stress. Lucian Moretti had not really come to her apartment. Had not really touched her face. Had not really said those words. You belong to me now. Vivian shuddered, almost spilling coffee on a customer. She apologized, forced a brittle smile, then turned away too quickly. Not a nightmare. She knew that. The message on her phone was still there. Proof she could not deny. Good night, Cara Mia. He was real. It was all real. And sooner or later, he would come back. Vivian glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:30 in the morning. The shift still had a long way to go. She tried to make herself focus. Tried to shove the image of those black eyes out of her mind. But her hands still trembled. And every time the bell above the door rang, her heart still stopped for one beat. Waiting. Afraid. And something else she would not dare name. Booth number 12 needs service. Marcus's voice carried from behind her, trembling and rasped raw. Vivian stood rooted where she was. Her hand still clamped around the tray so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She did not need to turn around to know Marcus was looking at her with a pleading, begging expression, as if asking her not to do anything that would drag him into trouble. Booth number 12, where he was sitting, where he had sat the day before, when he left behind the business card that changed her life. Vivian drew in a slow breath, forcing the frantic pounding in her chest to settle into something that resembled normal. She set the tray down on the counter, smoothed her wrinkled apron, and started walking toward booth number 12. Each step felt weighted with lead. Each step brought her closer to the predator who was waiting with patient certainty. Lucian Moretti sat there, relaxed, as if he owned the whole diner. Maybe he did. Vivian did not know, and she did not dare ask. He did not look at a menu. He did not look out the window. He looked only at her. Those black eyes tracked every movement like a hawk tracking prey. What do you need? Vivian stopped beside the booth, her voice calmer than she expected. Maybe numbness had replaced fear. Black coffee, Lucian said, his voice low, smooth as velvet. And you, sit down. I'm working. I can't sit down and... Sit down, Vivian. Not a request, a command. And her legs betrayed her before her brain could catch up. Vivian found herself sliding into the seat across from him, her knees brushing the cold underside of the table, her heart thudding hard against her ribs. He did not smile, but something in his eyes brightened, as if he were pleased with her obedience. You look tired, Lucian said, tilting his head as he studied her. Couldn't sleep. Vivian did not answer. She did not need to. The answer lived on her face, in the bruised darkness under her eyes, in skin so pale it made her look ill. I couldn't sleep either, he went on, his voice light as a passing breath. I kept thinking about you, about the way you trembled when I touched you, about your eyes when I told you that you belonged to me. Vivian swallowed, her throat dry. It was a mistake. I told you. That message wasn't for you, and yet you still opened the door for me. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, narrowing the space between them. You still stood there and listened to me. You still cried when I touched your face. Vivian turned her head away, unable to bear the weight of those eyes. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. He reached across the table, his fingers lifting her chin, forcing her to look at him. You chose to open the door. You chose to listen, and you chose not to call the police after I left. She chose not to call the police. Yes, she had not done it. Why? Because she knew it would be useless. Because she was afraid he would come back for revenge. Or because some small part of her did not want him to be in trouble. What do you want? Vivian asked, her voice rough. I already told you. Lucian let go and leaned back in the seat. You belong to me. I'm only making sure you understand that. I'm not an object for someone to own. No, he agreed, a faint smile passing over his mouth. You're not an object. You're the first woman who has ever made me want to own her. Vivian did not know how to respond to that. It was frightening. It was insane. And it made something inside her, the part she was trying to bury, shiver awake. Oh, and one more thing. Lucian drew his phone from the inside pocket of his suit jacket, scrolled for a few seconds, then set it down on the table and turned it toward her. On the screen was her call and message history. Nathan's number was still there, not deleted. Vivian's blood turned to ice. "You still haven't deleted Nathan's number." Lucian's voice was not soft anymore. Something cold and dangerous slid through it, like a blade hidden under velvet. "I'm disappointed, Vivian." She opened her mouth to explain, but no words came out. He knew she had disobeyed him, and the way he looked at her now, as if she had made an unforgivable mistake, sent a chill through her bones. Vivian felt the air inside the diner thicken, as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Lucian's disappointed gaze pressed down on her, so heavy she wanted to fold into something small and disappear. But before she could say anything to defend herself, he changed the subject. "Tell me about Sophie." The question hit Vivian like a bucket of ice water thrown straight into her face. Every fear, every worry she had been forcing down since last night flared up like fire. She shot to her feet, the chair scraping across the floor with a harsh, screaming sound that made a few customers turn their heads. "No." Vivian's voice came out sharp, trembling, but full of determination. "No. You do not get to mention my daughter. You do not get to think about her. You do not get to touch her." Lucian did not react to her outburst. He stayed seated, calm as stone, only his black eyes narrowing slightly, as if he were watching something interesting unfold. "Sit down, Vivian." "No, I am not sitting down. I am not talking about Sophie. Whatever you want from me, take it, but my daughter has nothing to do with this." She was shaking, her whole body shaking hard, but she did not care. Sophie was the only line she was willing to die to protect. "If you dare lay a hand on her, I swear." "What do you swear?" Lucian cut in, his voice still so steady it was infuriating. "What will you do? Call the police, hire a bodyguard, run to the end of the world." He stood, slowly, and Vivian took a step back on instinct. He was almost a full head taller than she was, his shadow falling over her and swallowing her like a dark cloud. "I do not hurt children, Vivian." His voice softened, still deep and solid, but no longer cold. "Not ever. Not once. Not ever. That is my rule." Vivian stared at him, searching his black depths for any sign of a lie, but she found nothing. Nothing except a strange kind of sincerity. Or maybe he was simply a better actor than she had imagined. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have no reason to lie." He moved closer, and this time Vivian did not retreat. "I want you, not your daughter. Sophie is safe. She will always be safe. I promise." Could the promise of a Mafia boss be trusted? Vivian did not know, but she did not have many choices beyond clinging to that promise, the way a drowning woman clings to a straw. "Then why are you asking about her?" "Because she is part of you," Lucian said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And I want to know everything about you." Vivian wanted to scream that it was insane, that he had no right to know anything about her, that she was not his for him to study. But the words lodged in her throat. "Where is Sophie's father?" The next question struck an old wound Vivian thought had closed. She went rigid, jaw locked tight. "None of your business. Everything about you is my business." He lifted his hand and gently, lightly touched her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Tell me." Vivian did not know why she spoke. Maybe she was too exhausted to resist. Maybe those eyes held a kind of dark magic, pulling words out of her that she could not stop. "Brandon Hayes," she heard her own voice say, distant and hollow. "He is Sophie's father. We were in love. At least I thought we were. Then I got pregnant." She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. "He said he loved me, said he would stay, said we would raise our child together." A bitter smile flickered at her mouth. "Then when I was 6 months pregnant, he disappeared. No explanation, no message. He just vanished, as if he had never existed." Vivian remembered those months, the nights she lay crying alone in an empty apartment, the times she called Brandon's number only to hear a recorded voice telling her the line was no longer in service. The last months of pregnancy she faced by herself, terrified and desperate. "He does not know about Sophie," she went on, her voice raw. "He does not know what she looks like. He does not know what she likes. He does not know she exists. He ran before he could learn anything." Silence. Vivian lifted her eyes to Lucian and shuddered at what she saw. His black gaze had changed. It was no longer curiosity, no longer possession. It darkened into something dangerous, like the sky before a storm. His jaw clenched, the muscle beneath his skin pulling tight as a wire. "Brandon Hayes," he repeated, each syllable fired out like a bullet. "Where is he now?" "I do not know." Vivian shook her head. "I tried to find him. There was nothing. No trace. Like he evaporated off the face of the earth." Lucian said nothing. He only looked at her. And in those dark eyes, Vivian saw something that made cold slide down her spine. He knew something. She was certain of it. And whatever it was not good news. Lucian stood there for a few seconds more, his eyes still not quite back to normal. Then he drew a long breath, as if forcing something dangerous inside him back under control, and stepped away. He pulled a wallet from the inside pocket of his suit jacket, took out a thick stack of cash, and set it on the table without counting. Vivian glanced down, and her heart jumped when she realized it was 5 $100 bills. $500. More than she made in an entire week of grinding exhaustion at this diner. "For the coffee I didn't drink," Lucian said, his voice calm again, though something cold still lingered beneath it. "And for your time." Before Vivian could protest, he turned and walked toward the counter. One of the 2 bodyguards, the man Vivian had heard him call Tony, was already waiting beside Marcus. She could not hear what they were saying, but she could see Marcus's face clearly. He had gone white, like a man staring straight at death. His eyes were wide, his head nodding over and over like a puppet on strings, his lips moving through answers. Vivian was sure were yes, and of course, and no problem. When Tony finished speaking, Marcus flicked a strange look at Vivian, half pity and half fear on her behalf. Then he lowered his head, unable to meet the eyes of anyone in Lucian's group. Lucian turned back and walked toward Vivian with long, certain strides. He stopped in front of her and held out his hand. "We're leaving." Not a question, not an offer, a command that could not be refused. Vivian stared at that hand, the long, strong fingers waiting for her. She could refuse. She could turn away, go back to work, pretend none of this was happening, but she knew it would be pointless. He would not let her go. And some part of her, the part she was trying to deny, did not want to go. "Sophie," she whispered, her voice thin. "I have to pick her up." 2 more hours, Lucian said, his voice softening just a little. "I'll have you back in time." She looked into his eyes, searching for deceit, searching for any reason to say no. But she found nothing except certainty, and something that looked almost like tenderness buried deep in that dark gaze. Vivian placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, like a velvet cage wrapping itself around her. He led her through the diner, past customers' curious stares, past Marcus standing rigid behind the counter as if he did not dare breathe too loudly. The door opened, and harsh midday sunlight hit Vivian's face. And there, right in front of the diner, a sleek black car waited. Not an ordinary car, the kind she only saw in movies, the kind that belonged to the rich and powerful, the kind that could swallow her whole and no one would ever know where she went. Tony opened the back door and stood aside, his expression blank as stone. Vivian stopped, her feet nailed to the sidewalk. This was the line. She knew it. Once she stepped into that car, she would step into his world, a world of darkness and secrets, of power and danger. There would be no going back. "I'm scared." She had not meant to say it, but the words slipped out anyway. Lucian stood beside her, his hand still holding hers. He did not smile. He did not mock her fear. "I know," he said, his voice low and deep, "but you'll be safer with me than anywhere else." A promise, or a threat, Vivian could not tell, but she still moved toward the car, still bent and slid inside, still let Lucian follow and settle beside her on the black leather seat. The door shut with a soft final click. Like the sound of a bolt sliding into place, the car began to roll forward, and Vivian watched through the window as Eddie's diner shrank and then disappeared around a corner. Her old life was left behind, and she did not know whether she would ever be able to go back. The interior of the car was more luxurious than anything Vivian had ever touched in her life. The black leather seat was soft, cradling her body. The scent of expensive leather mixed with Lucian's familiar cologne, filling the enclosed space. A dark, tinted partition separated the back seat from the driver up front, creating a private world with only the 2 of them inside. And Lucian was sitting very close. Too close. His thigh pressed against hers through the thin fabric of her cheap uniform. Heat from his body bled into hers like a slow current, raising goose flesh on her skin even though she was not cold. Vivian tried to shift farther away, but the car door blocked her back. There was nowhere left to run. "Nathan," Lucian spoke, breaking the silence. The name landed in the tight space like an accusation. Vivian went still. "What? Tell me about him." Not a question, a command. "Like everything else," Lucian said. "There's nothing to tell," Vivian answered, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Just a guy I met at a bar. Not important. Not important." Lucian repeated it, a faint, mocking smile flickering at his mouth. "And yet you were going to send him that message. The message you sent to me by mistake." Vivian bit her lip and said nothing. She did not want to remember that message. She did not want to remember the words she had written in a moment of loneliness and desperation. "You met him last weekend," Lucian went on, his voice low and unhurried as if he were telling a story. "At some bar. Your friend Rachel dragged you out. You had a few drinks, you talked to him, and then—" He paused and tilted his head, watching her. "Then you went home with him, didn't you?" Vivian wanted to ask how he knew, but she had already learned that Lucian Moretti knew everything. He had ways of uncovering secrets people thought they had hidden. "That's my business," she said, her voice hardening. "It doesn't concern you. Everything about you concerns me." Lucian reached over, his fingers gently lifting her chin, forcing her to face him. Those dark eyes pierced her, as if he were reading every thought, every feeling she tried to hide. "He touched you," Lucian said, his voice low and dangerous. "He kissed you, held you, slept with you. And you didn't feel anything, did you?" Vivian opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Because he was right. Nathan was kind. Nathan was handsome in an ordinary way. Nathan touched her the right way, said the right things. But when she lay beside him, when he held her in the dark, she felt only emptiness, like a bottomless vessel that nothing could fill. "He gave you one night," Lucian continued, his thumb brushing lightly over her cheek. "And the next morning you woke up just as lonely as before, still invisible, still starving for something he couldn't give you." Tears rose in Vivian's eyes. She hated him for speaking the truth, hated him for seeing straight through her, hated him for forcing her to face what she had tried to bury. "Stop," she whispered, her voice caught and thick. "That's why you sent that message." Lucian did not pause. "You wanted to feel something. Anything. You were so desperate you reached for a stranger, hoping he would bring you back to life." A tear rolled down her cheek, and Lucian wiped it away with his thumb, a tenderness completely at odds with the words he was saying. "I can give you what you're missing, Vivian." His voice dropped, almost a whisper against her ear. "The thing you're dying from not having. All you have to do is let me." The car stopped in front of a glass and steel skyscraper, rising straight into the sky like a giant sword thrust up through the clouds. Vivian looked up through the car window. She had to tip her head all the way back just to find the top. She had never been to this part of Boston, where the wealthy lived separated from the world below, inside their glass fortresses. Tony opened the door, and Lucian stepped out first. Then he turned and offered his hand to Vivian. She hesitated for a second before placing her hand in his, letting him guide her out of the car. Her worn shoes met a sidewalk polished clean like a mirror, and she suddenly became sharply aware of how out of place her wrinkled waitress uniform looked here. Lucian led her through thick glass revolving doors and into a grand lobby with white marble floors and a ceiling that soared overhead. The doorman lowered his head to Lucian without asking a single question, without checking any identification, without looking at Vivian even once, as if she did not exist, or as if Lucian's presence guaranteed everything. A private elevator waited at the far end of the lobby. Lucian used a black card and then entered a long code before the doors slid open. Inside, the elevator was lined in glossy walnut, with a gold-framed mirror and soft, gentle light. Vivian saw their reflections side by side. Lucian, tall and powerful in an expensive suit, and her, small and pale in cheap clothes that still carried the smell of grease. They looked like they came from two different worlds, because they did. The elevator climbed. Numbers jumped quickly on the display. 20, 30, 40. Vivian felt her ears fill with pressure as the air changed. Then the elevator stopped at the 50th floor. The doors opened, and she stepped into a world that did not belong to her. The penthouse spread out before her like a dream of wealth she had never dared to dream. Glass walls from floor to ceiling overlooked the whole of Boston. The buildings below reduced to tiny shapes, like toy models. The interior was minimalist, but unmistakably expensive. Black, gray, and silver tones flowed together, creating a space that was both cold and elegant. A massive black leather sofa, a glass table with stainless steel legs, a gray fur rug underfoot. On the walls hung paintings Vivian did not recognize, but she was certain they were worth more than the apartment she lived in. "Not much," Lucian said, his voice calm, as if this penthouse were only a temporary shack. "But it serves its purpose." Vivian did not know what to say. Her apartment could fit inside this living room, and there would still be space left over. She stood there, feet nailed to the gleaming wood floor, afraid to touch anything for fear she would stain it or break it. Lucian walked to a dark oak liquor cabinet, took out a bottle of amber whiskey and 2 crystal glasses. He poured with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times, then turned and offered 1 glass to Vivian. "Can you drink?" She accepted it, feeling the weight of the crystal in her hand. More expensive than everything she owned combined. "Why did you bring me here?" Her voice came out rough. Lucian did not answer right away. He walked toward the wall of glass, looking down at the city below with a thoughtful stillness. "These walls are reinforced," he said, in the same steady tone someone might use to talk about the weather. "The glass is bulletproof. It can withstand even a sniper rifle. Every entrance is monitored 24/7. The elevator requires a private code that only I and a few of my closest people know." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes giving nothing away. "In my world, there is no safety without defense, Vivian. Enemies are everywhere. One moment of carelessness can be your last." Vivian shivered. "My world," she repeated, bitterness slipping into her voice. "You keep talking about your world, but you never say it plainly. What are you? What do you do?" Lucian took a sip of whiskey, still watching her without blinking. "You already know what I am. You knew the first time you looked at me. Mafia boss, owning half the Boston underworld." She knew it, but hearing him nearly confirm it still sent cold sliding along her spine. "Then why me?" Her voice trembled. "Why a broke waitress in a 24/7 diner? You could have anyone, but I do not want anyone." Lucian set his glass down on the table and walked toward her. "I want you." Lucian stood there only a few steps from Vivian, but the distance between them felt like a chasm no measure could cross. He looked at her with a strange expression, a blend of possession and something almost like pity. Vivian did not know which frightened her more. "You asked why you," Lucian said, his voice low and unhurried. "I'll tell you. But first, there's something you need to hear." She tightened her grip on the whiskey glass, feeling the weight of the crystal like an anchor keeping her from drifting away. Whatever he was about to say, she knew it would not be good. Nothing good ever came from men like Lucian Moretti. Brandon Hayes. The name cracked through the silent penthouse like a gunshot. Vivian went rigid, every muscle in her body drawn tight as wire. "I already told you," she said, her voice shaking. "He left me. He disappeared. He has nothing to do with you. That's where you're wrong, Vivian." Lucian turned his back on her and walked to the wall of glass overlooking the city. His silhouette stood against the gray sky, dark and massive, like a statue built out of power. "Brandon Hayes didn't just abandon you." Vivian felt as if the floor were tilting beneath her feet. "What do you mean?" Silence held for a few seconds, heavy and suffocating. Then Lucian turned, his black eyes fixed on her with a frightening seriousness. "Nearly 4 years ago, Brandon worked for me." The words hit like an explosion in open air. Vivian shook her head, refusing to believe what she had just heard. "No, that's impossible. Brandon worked construction." He said. He lied. Lucian cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "About his job, about who he was, and very likely, about loving you." Vivian wanted to scream, to smash the glass in her hand, to run out of this penthouse and never come back. But her feet were nailed to the floor, her mouth dry and bitter, no sound coming. "Brandon was a courier," Lucian continued, each word like a knife pushed into her chest. "He moved money for my organization. Simple work, paid well. All he had to do was keep his mouth shut and do what he was told." He paused, took a sip of whiskey as if he were telling an ordinary story. "Nearly 4 years ago, he was assigned to deliver a package. Cash, $500,000. $500,000. The number rang in Vivian's head like a warning bell. It was money she could not even imagine. Money that could have changed her life and Sophie's forever. "Brandon took it," Lucian said, his voice ice cold. "And he disappeared." Vivian's world collapsed. Not slowly, like a building hit by a bomb. It fell in an instant, leaving no time to react. Brandon did not leave her because he was not ready to be a father. He did not leave because he stopped loving her. He left because he was running, because he had stolen $500,000 from a mafia boss and needed to vanish from the earth before he was found. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking apart. "No, that wasn't Brandon. He loved me. He was a thief and a coward." Lucian set his glass down and stepped toward her. "He looked you in the eye, told you he loved you, then ran when you needed him most. Left you alone to face pregnancy, poverty, the hell of a life you're living." Tears slid down Vivian's cheeks without her noticing. All the nights she lay crying, asking herself what she had done wrong. All the times she blamed herself for not being good enough to make Brandon stay. All the years she drained herself to raise Sophie, while he was out there somewhere with $500,000 he had stolen. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice raw with tears. "What do you want from me?" Lucian stopped right in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, smell whiskey on his breath. "Because you deserve the truth," he said, his hand lifting to wipe the tears from her cheek with a tenderness that did not match his words at all. And because 3 days ago, I found him. Vivian's heart stopped for one beat. You found Brandon. I always find the people who owe me, Vivian. Lucian's black eyes darkened, dangerous and merciless. Sooner or later, and Brandon Hayes owes me a great deal. Vivian took a step back. Her foot caught the leg of the glass table, but she did not feel pain. She did not feel anything except numbness spreading from her chest through the rest of her body. Brandon, the man she had loved, the man she had given her whole heart to, the man she had cried herself empty over for nearly 4 years. A thief, a criminal, a man who had looked straight into her eyes and lied about everything. It was all lies, she whispered, her voice shattering like glass on stone. The construction job, the late nights, the business trips, all of it. All of it, Lucian confirmed, his tone empty of emotion. He never worked construction. The late nights were deliveries for the organization. The business trips were moving money between cities. Vivian remembered the nights Brandon came home late, the smell of cigarettes and something unfamiliar clinging to him. She had believed him when he said it was the scent of cement and lumber from the job site. She had believed everything because she loved him, because she wanted to believe. And what about the love? Her voice came out raw. Did he love me, or was that a lie too? Lucian was silent for a long moment, and that silence was more brutal than any answer. I don't know what was in Brandon Hayes' heart, he finally said. But I do know that a man who loves a woman does not abandon her while she is pregnant with his child. He does not vanish without a word. He does not leave her to face everything alone while he runs with $500,000. Tears slid down Vivian's cheeks, hot and bitter. She had cried too much for Brandon Hayes. Cried when he left. Cried when she gave birth to Sophie alone in the hospital. Cried through sleepless nights holding her baby, terrified of what she would feed her the next day. And now she cried again, because she understood those tears had been wasted on a man who did not deserve them. Then another thought struck like lightning, turning the blood in her veins to ice. 3 days ago, she whispered, eyes wide with horror. You said you found Brandon 3 days ago, and yesterday you showed up at the diner and left your card for me. Lucian did not answer. He only looked at her, his dark eyes giving nothing away. This is revenge, Vivian said, her voice trembling. You found me through Brandon. You knew I was his ex, the mother of his child. You got close to me to punish him. She stumbled back another step, her spine hitting the cold glass wall. Sophie. Oh God, Sophie. Panic burst in her chest like fire. She's Brandon's child. What are you going to do to her? Are you going to use her to get back at him? Vivian lunged toward the elevator door, a mother's instinct crushing every other fear. She had to get to Sophie. She had to protect her. She had to take her far away from Lucian Moretti and the darkness of his world. But before she could touch the button, a hand closed around her wrist and pulled her back. Lucian stood there, his face still calm, but his eyes had changed. Something had softened in them, something close to understanding. Look at me, he said, his voice low and steady. Look at me, Vivian. She did not want to look. She wanted to wrench free, to run, to do anything, to get away from this place. But he did not let go, and she did not have the strength to fight him. Sophie will never be touched. Lucian spoke each word clearly, decisively, like an oath. I told you. I don't hurt children. It's my rule. But she's Brandon's child, Vivian choked out. She has the blood of the man who stole from you. She's your child, Lucian corrected, his other hand lifting her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Brandon Hayes did not raise her for a single day. He did not stay up at night when she was sick. He did not work himself into the ground to buy her milk. That was you. Only you. Tears kept falling down Vivian's face, but her heartbeat slowed, just a little. Why should I believe you? She whispered. You're a mafia boss. You kill people. I kill the people who deserve to die. Lucian cut in, his voice carrying no shame at all. Traitors, thieves, men who hurt the innocent. I don't touch children. I don't touch innocent women. That's my line. He paused, his thumb wiping away her tears. Sophie is innocent. She will never be harmed because of her father's sins. I promise you. Vivian searched those black depths, hunting for a lie, for proof that he was manipulating her. But she found nothing except a strange sincerity, a certainty that did not waver, and she wanted to believe him. God help her. She wanted to believe him so badly. Lucian did not let go of Vivian. His fingers still held her chin, forcing her to meet those bottomless black eyes. The space between them was so small she could count each thick, dark lash, could feel his warm breath brushing her lips. You've lived with the consequences of Brandon Hayes' cowardice and greed for nearly 4 years, Lucian said, his voice low and slow, each word striking Vivian's chest like a hammer. Nearly 4 years working yourself into the ground at that miserable diner. Nearly 4 years wondering if you'll have enough money to pay rent tomorrow. Nearly 4 years raising your child alone, while the man who should have been beside you has been hiding somewhere with $500,000. Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to say she was fine, that she could take care of herself and Sophie, but the words stuck in her throat, because she knew it was a lie. She was not fine. She had never been fine. She had only been trying to survive day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. I watched you that day at the diner, Lucian continued, his other hand smoothing gently over her dry, tangled hair. I watched you move like a ghost between the tables. I watched you pour coffee for people who never looked at your face. I watched you force a smile while your eyes were dead from exhaustion. He paused, his thumb gliding lightly over her cheek, still wet with tears. Do you know what I thought then? Vivian shook her head. She did not trust herself to speak. I thought this is the strongest woman I've ever met, Lucian said, his voice softening slightly, and also the one who deserves more than this. More than that filthy diner. More than that falling apart apartment. More than the life you're living. I don't need your pity, Vivian said, her voice rough, still trying to hold on to what little pride she had left. That isn't pity. Lucian lowered his voice, and his dark eyes lit with something fierce and dangerous. It's truth, and I'm going to fix it. Fix it. She repeated the word, not understanding. Brandon owes me, Lucian said. Money, loyalty, respect. And he paid his debt by abandoning you and the little girl he doesn't even know exists. He tipped his head, looking at her as if she were something valuable. Brandon took everything from you. Safety, stability, the chance at a better life. I'm going to give it all back. Vivian blinked, trying to process what she was hearing. What are you saying? Belong to me, Lucian said, his tone no longer an offer, but almost an order. Truly belong to me. Let me take care of you and Sophie. Let me give you everything Brandon should have given you, and more. You want to buy me? Vivian said, bitterness rising in her throat. You think you can use money too? Not buy. Lucian cut her off, his voice turning sharp. I'm not buying you like an object. I want you to belong to me because you choose it, because you know it's best for you and for Sophie. He released her chin and took a step back, but his gaze never left her. You will never have to worry about money again. Sophie will go to the best schools, live in the safest neighborhoods, have everything a child could ever need. You won't work yourself to exhaustion. You won't live in an apartment where the ceiling could collapse at any moment. And in return, Vivian asked, her voice shaking, what do you want from me? You, Lucian said simply, as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. I want you, completely mine. No one else touches you. No one else looks at you the way I look at you. You're mine, and only mine. Vivian's head spun. This was insane. Completely insane. She could not sell herself to a mafia boss just because he promised her a better life. But another part of her, the part that was exhausted from fighting alone, the part worn down from counting every dollar, that part whispered that maybe this was not the worst idea. I need time, she said, her voice small. I can't decide right now. Lucian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You have until tomorrow, 7 in the evening. I'll pick you up at the diner. Not a request, a statement. Like everything else with Lucian Moretti, Vivian stood there, her heart battering against her ribs as if it meant to break the cage open. Lucian's offer echoed in her mind, each word like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward without end. Belong to him. She would belong to a mafia boss, traded for protection and care. It sounded like something from a movie, not something that happened in real life. What does belonging to you mean? She asked, her voice rough. What exactly? I need to know before I decide anything. Lucian tilted his head, a faint smile passing over his mouth, as if her question were both interesting and naive. He stepped closer, closing the distance until Vivian could feel the heat coming off him. It means you share my bed, he said, low and measured, each word landing on her skin like a slow burn. You share a life with me. You are at my side when I need you. You don't turn away when I want you. Vivian swallowed, her throat dry and bitter. You want me to be your mistress. I want you to be mine, Lucian corrected, his fingers lifting to smooth a loose strand of hair from her cheek. Not only a mistress, the only woman in my life, the one I protect, the one I take care of, the one I claim. Claim, she repeated, bitterness rising. Like a treasure, Lucian countered, his dark eyes sharpening with something fierce. Like the most precious thing I have. I don't share, Vivian. I don't allow anyone else to touch what belongs to me. And in return, I give you everything. Safety, stability, A life you've never dared to imagine. Vivian shook her head, trying to claw her way back to clear thought through the storm pulling at her. This is insane, she said, trembling. You don't know me. I don't know you. We've known each other less than 2 days, and you're talking about claiming me like it's normal. I know you more than you think, Lucian said, his hand sliding from her hair to her cheek, to her chin, his thumb brushing the edge of her lower lip with a quiet certainty. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. I know you love Sophie more than your own life. I know you've been alone too long, starving to be seen, to be held, to be cared for. His thumb pressed lightly, and Vivian felt her breath catch. And I know that even while you call it insane, part of you is weighing it. Part of you wants to say yes. You're awfully confident, she whispered, but her voice did not hold the steel it had a moment ago. I know what I want. Lucian lowered his forehead to hers. His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her feel unsteady, as if her body and her will were no longer entirely her own. And right now, I want you. Then he kissed her. Not the gentle touch from last night, not the careful tenderness of a familiar love. This was a kiss that carried ownership, a kiss that made a claim, a kiss that said, without words, that he believed she belonged to him already. His mouth came down on hers with a force that stole her protest. Vivian should have pushed him away. She should have slapped him. She should have run from this dangerous man and never looked back. But she did none of those things. Instead, she kissed him back. Her hand caught the front of his suit jacket, not to shove him away, but to pull him closer. Her mouth parted, answering him with a hunger she had not admitted even to herself. She kissed him like thirst finding water, like drowning finding something solid. A low sound rumbled in Lucian's throat, raw and satisfied. His hand slid into her hair, holding her there, as if he could not bear the idea of distance between them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Vivian looked up at him, her eyes blurred with want, her lips swollen from the intensity of the moment. That, Lucian murmured, his thumb grazing her lower lip again, slow and possessive, is what it feels like. That's what you've been missing. And I can give it to you every day, for the rest of your life, if you let me. Vivian did not answer. She could not, because she knew that if she opened her mouth right then, she would say yes before she even had time to think. Lucian stepped back. His black eyes were still burning as he looked at her, but he had regained that frightening calm of his. He smoothed the lapel of his suit jacket, as if the kiss a moment ago had been no more than an ordinary conversation, then held his hand out to Vivian. I'll take you home, he said, his voice low and certain. You still have to pick up Sophie. Sophie. The name snapped Vivian back to reality like a bucket of cold water. Her daughter, a 3-year-old child waiting at daycare, knowing nothing about the storm crashing into their lives. Vivian nodded. She placed her hand in Lucian's and let him lead her back to the elevator. The descent from the 50th floor happened in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. Lucian stood beside her, his shoulder brushing hers, the warmth of his body bleeding into her like a steady reminder of what had just happened between them. Her lips still tingled from that kiss. The black car waited outside the building. Tony opened the door, and Vivian got in without Lucian having to tell her. She was already getting used to this car, to the scent of expensive leather, to the private space created by the dark glass partition. That frightened her more than anything else. The fact that she was beginning to grow accustomed to his world. The car moved through Boston's streets, leaving the wealthy district behind and heading back toward the poorer outskirts, where Sophie's daycare sat. Lucian sat beside her, silent, watching the city through the window, but his hand held hers and did not let go. You have until tomorrow, he finally said as they neared their destination. 7 in the evening. I will pick you up at the diner. Vivian looked at him, searching for any sign she could negotiate, any sign she could ask for more time, but those black eyes gave away nothing except absolute certainty. And if I say no, she asked, her voice small, then I'll wait. Lucian replied, his thumb stroking lightly over the back of her hand. I'm patient when I need to be. But you will say yes, Vivian. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe a month from now. The outcome will be the same. The car stopped a short distance from the daycare. Lucian lifted her hand to his mouth and placed a light kiss on her fingers before letting go. Go pick up your daughter. I'll see you tomorrow. Vivian stepped out, her legs a little unsteady as her shoes met the familiar sidewalk. She turned her head back and saw Lucian still watching her through the dark-tinted glass. Then the car rolled away in silence and disappeared around the corner. Happy Kids Daycare stood in front of her, pastel-painted walls and the echo of children's laughter spilling from inside. Vivian drew a deep breath, forcing herself to push every thought of Lucian aside before she opened the door and stepped in. Sophie sat in the corner of the classroom, absorbed in coloring a butterfly picture. The moment she saw her mother, her eyes lit up, and she ran toward Vivian like a small whirlwind. "Mommy!" Sophie crashed into Vivian's legs and hugged tight, as if they had been apart for a whole year instead of just a few hours. "Mommy, you're early." Vivian bent down and lifted her, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo, feeling the small arms loop around her neck. In that moment, just that moment, her worry dissolved. There was only her and Sophie, only the simplest and purest kind of love. "Look, Mommy." "I drew a butterfly," Sophie chattered, holding up the paper. "My teacher said it's really pretty, and I ate chocolate cookies. They were so yummy. Mommy." "And I played on the slide with Lily. It was so fun." Vivian smiled, nodding along with each piece of her daughter's story, but her mind drifted elsewhere. She looked into Sophie's clear eyes that resembled Brandon's in a way that hurt, and she wondered what she would say to her child if she agreed to Lucian. How would she explain the strange man who would step into their lives? How would she protect Sophie in the dark world she was about to enter? "I love you," Vivian whispered, holding Sophie closer. "I love you so much." "I love you too." Sophie kissed Vivian's cheek, wet and messy, and sticky with the kind of innocent affection only a 3-year-old gives. Vivian laughed, but inside, she was breaking. The decision she had to make would not affect only her. It would change Sophie's life forever. Sophie slept soundly beside Vivian, her breathing soft and steady, one tiny hand still wrapped around her mother's finger even in her dreams. The shabby apartment lay in darkness, lit only by streetlight slipping through the gap in an old curtain, painting trembling bands of light across the ceiling. Vivian lay there with her eyes wide open, unable to sleep even though her body was exhausted. Her mind churned like a relentless whirlpool, pulling her down into thoughts she could not escape. Brandon. She thought of him first, the man she had loved with the full, innocent force of her heart. Nearly 4 years ago, she had believed he was everything. The future, the father of the baby growing inside her, the man who would stay beside her for the rest of her life. Now she knew the truth. Brandon Hayes was not the hardworking construction worker he pretended to be. He was a courier for a Mafia organization, moving dirty money between cities, living a double life she had never suspected. And when the opportunity came, he had not hesitated. He stole $500,000 and vanished, leaving her with a 6-month pregnancy and a heart in pieces. Every late night he came home, every business trip, every tender word, all of it had been a lie. She had cried herself empty for someone like that. She had blamed herself for not being good enough to make him stay. She had lived with guilt and shame for being a single mother, while the man who caused it all was somewhere out in the world spending the money he had stolen. With a bitter clarity, Vivian realized how many tears she had wasted on someone who did not deserve them. She turned her head and looked at Sophie sleeping, an angelic face in the dim light. The little girl was the only good thing Brandon had left behind, and he did not even know she existed. He did not deserve to know. Then Vivian thought about her life now. 3 jobs, waitressing at Eddie's diner, cleaning offices in the early morning, and making deliveries on weekends. Even added together, it was still not enough to cover rent, daycare, food, utilities. Every month she had to choose between paying all the bills or buying enough groceries for Sophie. Every month she stayed up late and woke up early, sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, dark circles under her eyes, her spine aching. 27 and looking 40. She remembered Sophie's words from yesterday. Mommy is always tired, 3 years old, and her daughter had already noticed her mother was running on empty. Was this the childhood she was giving her child? A mother who was always tired, always worried, always counting every last dollar. And then Lucian Moretti had appeared, a Mafia boss, the most dangerous man in the city, a man who could make her disappear and no one would ever find the body, but also the only man who saw her, truly saw her. Not the way the diner customers looked through her as if she were glass. Not the way her mother looked at her with pity. He looked at her as if she were something valuable, something worth holding with care, something worth protecting. Vivian remembered the kiss that afternoon, the way his mouth had taken hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe, the way he had tangled his hand in her hair, pulled her closer, marked her as if she belonged to him and only him. She had never been kissed like that. She had never felt hunger like that. She had never felt so alive. He was dangerous, she knew that. But he was also offering her a way out, a chance for Sophie to have a better life, a chance for Vivian not to work herself to death. And in exchange, belonging to him, only that. Vivian reached down for her phone on the floor. The screen flared bright in the darkness. She opened her contacts and scrolled until she found Nathan's name. The number was still there, a reminder of the normal life she once believed she might have. But she did not want normal anymore. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be touched. She wanted to belong to someone, even if that someone was a mafia boss. Her finger pressed the delete button. Nathan's number disappeared from her contacts, and with it went Vivian's last hesitation. She set the phone down, turned, and pulled Sophie close into her arms. Tomorrow, she would give Lucian Moretti her answer. The next morning came too fast. Vivian woke with Sophie still curled in her arms, and for one brief moment she forgot everything. She forgot Lucian Moretti. She forgot his offer. She forgot the decision she had made in the night. Then reality crashed down like a tidal wave and swept her back into the merciless present. Today was the last day. Vivian took Sophie to daycare the way she always did, kissed her forehead, promised she would pick her up on time, but as she watched Sophie run into the classroom with that innocent smile, Vivian wondered if this was the last time anything would feel normal. Eddie's diner greeted her with the familiar bell and the haunting smell of grease. Vivian changed into her uniform, tied up her hair, and fastened her apron with the same mechanical movements of a robot running on a program. She had done these things thousands of times, but today they carried a different weight. This might be the last time she stood in this filthy kitchen. The last time she poured coffee for customers who never looked at her face. The last time she was the invisible waitress in a 24/7 diner. Marcus watched her from behind the counter, worry in his eyes, but he did not dare ask. Ever since the day Lucian appeared, Marcus treated Vivian like a bomb that could go off at any moment. No more shouting, no more threats to dock her pay, no more cutting remarks, only a taut, loaded silence, and stolen glances filled with fear. Vivian did not know what Marcus had heard from Lucian's bodyguard that day, but whatever it was enough to keep him from touching her again. The shift stretched on without end. Each hour that passed felt like a countdown to something unavoidable. At 10 in the morning, Vivian poured coffee and thought of Lucian's black eyes. At 11, she wiped tables and remembered the possessive force of his kiss. At 12 noon, she carried plates and wondered how her life would change after tonight. 1 o'clock, 2, 3. Time moved strangely, slow and fast at once. Vivian felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into the abyss below, knowing she would jump, but not ready. 4, 5, 6. Her heart beat faster with every passing minute. At 6:30 in the evening, Vivian set her tray down at the counter for the last time. She walked into the staff room, untied the apron soaked with the smell of grease, and folded it neatly, setting it on top of her locker. She stared at it for a long time. That apron had stayed with her through so many punishing shifts, so many late nights, so much sweat and so many tears. Then she turned her back and walked away without looking back. Marcus stood behind the counter, watching her with a strange expression. "Leaving early?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," Vivian said, and offered no explanation. She owed him none. She pushed through the diner door, and the bell rang behind her one last time. Cool evening air hit her face, and her heart stopped for one beat when she saw the sleek black car waiting across the street. Lucian had come half an hour early, or maybe he had been waiting there all day. She did not know. Tony stood beside the car and opened the back door when he saw her. Vivian drew a deep breath, her chest tight with a mix of fear, nerves, and something that felt almost like expectation. This was her choice. She had decided. There was no way back. She crossed the street, walking toward the black car, walking toward Lucian Moretti, walking toward the new life waiting for her. Vivian stepped into the car, and the familiar scent of leather and expensive cologne hit her at once. Lucian was already inside, still in that flawless black suit without a single crease, still with those bottomless black eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. The door closed behind her, and the outside world disappeared. There was only her and him in this private space, in the moment that would decide the rest of her life. "You're early," Lucian said, his voice low, warmer than she remembered. "You're early, too," Vivian answered, fighting to keep her voice steady while her heart thundered inside her ribs. The car rolled forward, and they sat in silence for a few minutes. Vivian looked out the window and watched Boston slide past like slow-motion film. She knew she needed to speak, needed to give him her answer. But there was something she had to ask first. "Brandon," she said, still not looking at him. "What are you going to do to him?" Silence held for a few seconds, heavy and tight. Then Vivian heard Lucian exhale, soft and controlled. "Does it matter to you?" "Yes." She turned to look at him, her gaze steady. "If I agree to you, I need to know what kind of man I'm placing myself in the hands of. I need to know what you will do to my daughter's father." Lucian watched her for a long moment, as if weighing whether to tell her the truth or a lie that would let her sleep. In the end, he chose the truth. "I'm not a good man, Vivian," he said, even and without a trace of regret. "I've never claimed to be. I've done things you don't want to know. I've hurt people. I've killed when it was necessary. In my world, mercy is weakness, and hesitation can get you killed." Vivian swallowed, but she did not look away. She needed to hear all of it. "But I have rules," Lucian continued, those black eyes holding hers. "I don't harm the innocent. I don't touch children. I don't promise what I can't keep. That's my line, and I've never crossed it." "And Brandon?" she asked again, her voice rough. "Brandon stole from me $500,000. That requires consequences." Lucian paused, his fingers tapping lightly against his knee as if he were thinking. "But killing him isn't necessary. He'll return what he took, work to repay the debt, then disappear. That's the most humane option I can offer." "Unless what?" Vivian asked, sensing he was holding something back. "Unless you want him to be part of Sophie's life," Lucian replied, and the answer stopped Vivian cold. "If you want that, I'll arrange it. Supervised visits, support money, anything you think is best for the little girl. Sophie is innocent. She deserves the chance to know her father if that's what you want." Tears rose in Vivian's eyes. She had not expected Lucian to say this. She had not expected a cold, ruthless mafia boss to bend for the sake of a child who was only 3 years old, a child he had never even met. "Sophie doesn't need him," Vivian whispered, her voice breaking. "Brandon abandoned us. He doesn't deserve to be called a father. But maybe one day she'll want to know," Lucian said gently. "She'll want answers. She'll want to understand why. Then on that day he can give her answers," Vivian decided. "But not now. Not when she's too little to understand." Lucian nodded, accepting her decision without argument. "Anything else?" "Yes." Vivian drew a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I have conditions. Say them." "Sophie is always the first priority," Vivian said, her voice firmer now. "Her safety, her happiness, her future. That is not negotiable." "Agreed. I'm not a prisoner. I need freedom, room to breathe. You can't keep me in a gilded cage." "You'll have freedom within reasonable limits," Lucian said. "My world is dangerous. There will be security, but for protection, not imprisonment." Vivian nodded, accepting that. "And I need to know exactly what you expect from me. No vagueness, no half measures." "You share my bed, you share my life," Lucian said, low and deliberate. "When I want you, you come. In return, I give you everything. Everything you've ever lacked, ever ached for, ever dreamed of." The car stopped, and Vivian realized they had arrived at Lucian's penthouse. He turned to her, those black eyes burning with expectation and desire. "Say it, Vivian," he whispered, his hand lifting to stroke her cheek. "Tell me you're mine." Vivian looked into those eyes, the eyes that had seen her when the rest of the world treated her as invisible, the eyes of the most dangerous man she had ever met, and also the only man who made her feel alive. "I'm yours," she whispered, and the words felt like a door closing behind her, with no road back. Lucian did not wait for Tony to open the door. He stepped out of the car himself, came around to Vivian's side, and pulled her into his arms before she could even set a foot on the ground. She sucked in a startled breath when he lifted her, one arm under her knees, the other around her back, holding her against his chest, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I can walk on my own," Vivian whispered, but her arms had already slipped around his neck on instinct. "I know," Lucian replied, his black eyes fixed on her with something hot and dangerous. "But I don't want you to." He carried her through the lobby and into the private elevator, and Vivian found herself caught in his gaze, unable to look away. The elevator rose, but she felt nothing except the warmth of his breath against her skin, the strength of his arms holding her, the steady beat of his heart beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. The doors opened, and Lucian stepped into the penthouse with her still in his arms. He did not stop in the living room. He did not pour a drink. He did not make conversation. He went straight down the long hallway to a pair of black oak doors, pushed them open with his shoulder, and walked into his bedroom. The room was larger than Vivian's entire apartment. A massive bed dressed in black and silver filled most of the space, its headboard set against a wall of glass that looked out over Boston at night. City lights glittered like a million fallen stars. But Vivian saw nothing except Lucian's eyes as he lowered her gently onto the bed. He stood for a moment, looking down at her as if he could swallow her whole with that stare alone. Then he removed his suit jacket and set it aside, loosened his tie with movements that were slow and deliberate. Vivian lay there, her heart pounding like a war drum, unable to pull her eyes from him. "This is the last time you wear this," Lucian said, his voice low and rough, his fingers brushing the collar of her worn diner uniform. "Starting tomorrow, you'll wear what you deserve." Then he bent and kissed her, and every thought scattered. This kiss was not like the one in the penthouse the day before. Not rushed, not harsh, slow, deep, as if he had an entire lifetime to learn her, and no need to hurry. His mouth moved with a careful reverence, as if he were memorizing her breath, the smallest sound she made, the soft surrender she could not fully explain. His touch guided her out of the layers she had worn like armor for years, not only cloth, but fear and habit, and the quiet grief of being unseen. And when there was nothing left between them but closeness and warmth and shared breath, Vivian felt something she had forgotten long ago. She felt seen, truly seen, not the looking through her from customers at the diner, not her mother's pitying gaze, not Nathan's emptiness, hands present while the rest of him was somewhere else. Lucian looked at her as if she were the center of the universe, as if nothing else existed but her, as if he had been searching for her his whole life and had finally found her. "Mine," he murmured near her ear, his voice rough and trembling. "Only mine," and Vivian believed it. In that moment, in his arms, under those burning black eyes, she believed she belonged to him. And maybe, impossibly, he belonged to her too. Afterward, they lay together on the enormous bed, their bodies still tangled, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Vivian rested her head on Lucian's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, and for the first time in years, she felt peace. "Tomorrow," Lucian said, his hand smoothing through her hair. "I'm moving you and Sophie out of that apartment. There's a house in Beacon Hill, good security, close to the best schools in the city. You'll like it. Too fast," Vivian whispered, but she did not argue. "No." Lucian kissed the top of her head. "This is what should have happened, nearly 4 years ago. I'm only correcting Brandon's mistake." Vivian closed her eyes and let the warmth of him spread through her. Tomorrow would bring a new home, a new life, a new future for her and Sophie. All she had to do was trust the man holding her now. And strangely, she did. She truly did. 3 months later, Vivian stood at the kitchen window of their new home, looking out at a garden soaked in late afternoon sun. The house sat in Beacon Hill, one of the safest and most prestigious neighborhoods in Boston. Not a penthouse in the sky, but a real house, with a wide yard, a white fence, and rose bushes in full bloom. Lucian had bought it for her and Sophie just 1 week after that first night, saying a child needed room to run, needed green grass under her feet instead of cold concrete. Sophie was racing through the yard now, her brown curls flying in the wind, her clear laughter filling the air. She chased butterflies, tumbled into the grass, then sprang up and ran again, bursting with energy and joy Vivian had never seen in her before. Sophie had her own room now, a pastel pink room with a princess bed, overflowing with toys and storybooks. She no longer had to sleep on a thin mattress beside her mother in a damp apartment. No more worrying the ceiling might collapse at any moment, or hearing rats in the walls at night. Lou, look, I caught a butterfly," Sophie shouted toward the back door, waving her hand. Vivian smiled at the nickname. Sophie had named Lucian herself during the first week, when she could not pronounce his full name. Lucian pretended to be annoyed every time he heard it, but Vivian had seen his eyes soften, had seen the corner of his mouth lift even as he tried to hide it. A cold, ruthless mafia boss, completely defeated by a little 3-year-old girl. Vivian looked back over the past 3 months and still could not believe how much her life had changed. 3 months ago, she had been an invisible waitress at Eddie's diner, working 3 jobs and still barely surviving, sleeping 4 hours a night, looking 40 at 27. Now she had time to bring Sophie to school every morning, cook dinner for her family every evening, and sleep through the night in Lucian's arms. She no longer worried about money, no longer counted every dollar, no longer stayed up late and woke early, working herself toward collapse. She had been enrolled in college again, finally chasing the degree she had been forced to abandon when she got pregnant with Sophie. Life was not perfect. There were still nights Lucian came home late, his eyes darker than usual, his hands carrying the faint smell of gunpowder she did not dare ask about. There were still secret calls he had to step outside to take. There were still bodyguards behind her whenever she and Sophie left the house, but it was the price she had chosen to pay. And watching Sophie run through the yard with that bright, unguarded smile, Vivian knew she had made the right decision. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and Vivian leaned back into a familiar chest, the expensive cologne mixed with something that belonged only to Lucian, filling her senses. "What are you thinking about?" His voice was low at her ear, warm breath against her neck. "About 3 months ago," Vivian said, resting her hand over his where it lay across her stomach. About that message I sent by mistake. Lucian gave a quiet laugh, the sound vibrating through his chest into her back. The best message I've ever received. You're crazy, she said, but her mouth curved into a smile. Crazy about you. He kissed her shoulder softly, then asked the question he had asked every day since she moved here. Happy. Vivian looked out at the garden, at Sophie trying to catch a yellow butterfly, at the beautiful home Vivian had never dared to dream of, and felt the arms of the man who had given her all of it. Yes, she whispered, and it was the truth. I'm happy. Lucian held her tighter, and they stood there in silence, watching Sophie play in the afternoon sun. Sometimes, Vivian thought, the best thing in your life comes from the worst mistake, a message sent to the wrong number, a reckless moment, a decision that felt insane, and she had found where she belonged. She was his, he was hers, and at last, after years of living like an invisible ghost, Vivian Cole had been seen. Vivian and Lucian's story ends here, but the message it carries lingers on. Life sometimes pushes us into dead ends that feel impossible to escape. We become exhausted, lonely, and we start to feel invisible in this world. But remember this, even in the darkest moments, there is always a light waiting. Sometimes that light comes from the least expected place, from a mistake, a risk, a leap into the unknown. What matters is whether we have the courage to reach for the chance. Vivian chose trust. She chose hope. She chose love, even knowing the road ahead was full of danger. And she found her happiness. Dear friends, how did this story make you feel? Have you ever lived through a moment when it seemed like all hope was gone, only to find light from a place you never expected? Please share with us in the comments below. We truly want to hear your stories, your feelings from the deepest part of your heart. Every share you leave is a powerful encouragement for us to keep creating better and better content. If you enjoyed this story, please do not forget to press like and share the video with friends and family to spread meaningful stories. And if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please press subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss new videos every day. We sincerely thank you for taking the time to watch all the way to the end. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, peace, and happiness each day. No matter how hard life becomes, hold tight to your faith and hope, because the best thing may be waiting for you just around the next corner. Goodbye for now, and see you again in the next video.